This episode of Building Barrels is brought to you by the Winds of Barbados. Please excuse their continued interruptions.
Welcome. Thanks for dropping in to Building Barrels, where we explore the technology, planning, and development of adventure centers using man-made waves to spread the stoke of surfing. My name is Michael, and I'd like you to join me in learning everything we can about surf park development. Together, we can build barrels in our hometown. Today we're going to review the Surf Park Summit 2020. This review is long overdue. 2020 was a crazy year. The Surf Park Summit was originally going to be held in the spring, and it got postponed because of COVID and the lockdowns, and it didn't get held until the fall. And during that time, I was doing some traveling, doing a move, and it just so happens that I ended up here in Barbados. So I'm recording this from the beautiful island of Barbados, considered by some to be the surf capital of the world. And even though I'm here in the surf capital of the world, I'm still bringing you surf park information. So today I'm going to start with an overview and review of this Surf Park Summit 2020. But I'm also going to be posting a series and break it down into more detail that was taken away from those presentations. That being said, we'll go ahead and get into the overview of the summit. The summit was done all on Zoom calls or pre-recorded presentations. The panels were held by a group Zoom calls, and anybody who was attending could watch all of this. They're not actually in the Zoom call, they're just watching the presentations from their home, but without actually being in the Zoom call. The beginning of the summit, there was an introduction by the founder, John Luff, as well as a welcome by Sean Thompson, old school pro surfer. But the main introduction to the Surf Park Summit was done by Guy Kawasaki, and he was just going through and sharing his love of surfing. He's a fairly new surfer, and he's really passionate about it. He was talking about sharing surfing with others, whether it's in the ocean or through surf parks, and he saw a great opportunity to share surfing through surf parks. After Guy's presentation, they got into some of the meatier elements of the Surf Park Summit, and the first one being lessons learned from current surf park operators. And what they discussed in that is they went into a lot of site selection and tech selection. They talked about due diligence, and they talked about the front of the house, meaning your employees and how they interact with customers, and how customers interact with their customer experience when coming to your surf park. Then they had another panel with some experts in water quality, and some of the takeaways there were you want to make water quality a priority from the beginning, including where is your water source coming from, because the water source for your pool is going to be very important. And some of that can come into your site selection once again. It seems like that's a pretty important part of surf park development, as well as your due diligence, because every site is going to be different, and you got to make sure that you can get good quality water from your water source, but also you need to understand the elements coming into the surf park, like dust, dirt, or whatnot, pollen. All of that is important. Then they also talked about dealing with local regulations. They talked about water quality equipment and some of the lessons learned in their helping surf park operators, or not only surf park operators, but also other water featured resorts. And then there was a quick discussion about legislating for surf parks. And like I said, it was really quick. To me, it seemed like The gentleman speaking talked about plastic straws more than surf parks. But the bottom line is you need to talk to your local governments early on so that you can steer the discussion on how to classify your surf park to fit local legislation. So after his presentation, we had someone from Wave Garden talking about their product, and he went into some of the history of it, the energy efficiency of their technology, where they're going next. But more so for the surf park operator, he talked about how to get started in developing a surf park and some of the operations, and he gave a few other tips in surf park development. Then we had a presentation from, I believe, an insurance provider talking about risk management and how to minimize your surf park risk, loss reductions, and insurance. And once again, he said you need to look into risk management and your insurance companies early on in the development process. Then we got into another one of the more meatier elements of the summit, which I got a lot out of. It really made you think from a slightly different perspective. And this was what women want. And apparently women want pool boys. No, I'm just kidding. That did come up. But apparently what women want most out of their surf park is an experience. And they want a good experience coming from the first interaction and finding information about your surf park to a good, authentic surf experience. They don't really like the whole theme park idea. They want something that feels a little bit more like this, like what I'm surrounded with right now. They also want safety. They want to make sure that the surf park is safe. They want a nice ambiance to the surf park. And equipment malfunctions are a major concern as well. And then they want to know that the surf instructors are qualified and capable of teaching them and their children. Another element was they want some good music, not the hardcore surf punk type music. Then there was a presentation from Surf Float, and they went into the history and how they're now operating at Palm Springs Surf Club and where it's going to go in the Palm Springs Surf Club, where it's going to go in the future, and some of the technologies that they have now, how they're going to expand the Palm Springs Surf Club. And we can get into some of the technologies in a different episode. Oh, and the Surf Flock, they also talked about that they have some new, more compact models that you might even be able to fit in your backyard. So then there was another panel discussion about safety, which was another big element of the Surf Park Summit. They talked about lifeguards, they talked about more insurance and how different factors influence the insurance. They talked about your equipment, they talked about alcohol, and they talked about employee safety training. And all of that goes into helping minimize your risk and helping minimize how much you spend on insurance. Then we had a presentation from regarding surf park management, like the actual operations management, and they got into maximizing your returns. They talked about operational design, marketing, the different development stages, and operating the surf park after launch. Wrapping up the day, there was a panel discussing public-private partnerships, how to engage the local community with your private business. And they discussed how to get city and community support, city incentives, and some of the concerns that a city community may have with your surf park and how to manage all that and get public support so you can have a successful surf park. So all of that wrapped up day one, and that was a lot to go in, and that's one reason why I'm going to break this down into smaller bites, because I wanted to give a general overview and then break it down into shorter pieces that might be of more interest to you. Now, day two, we started off with an introduction from Jess Ponting, one of the founders of Surf Park Summit, and he discussed, what's going to happen after COVID and how tourism is impacted and where it's going to go from there, and how surf parks are positioned pretty well to bounce back from the COVID issues. After that, we got into a presentation on equity in surfing. It was titled Surfing History and Future, but it was really more about how women have been impacted through the surfing's history and where it should go in the future and how to bring equity into surfing. Then there was a panel discussion on one of the most important aspects of surf park development, which is how to finance a surf park. And I didn't really see this as a how to get your surf park financed. It was more along the lines of tips to get your surf park financed. Right off the bat, they talked about COVID again and the long-term surf park impact of that and how it might hurt or help surf parks. They discussed capital stack difficulties, meaning where's your money coming from. They talked about the importance of your business model versus the importance of the people who are bringing the surf park together. They talked about the different stages of capital and the needs that you must have put together prior to getting an investor. There was a discussion on why new surf parks aren't getting it done and whether or not getting it done is hurting the industry. They talked more about business models and they talked about some of the pitfalls of raising capital. Then we had a presentation from a gentleman who runs a high-end surfing camp, and he talked about some of the factors of success, which was very interesting, and there were a lot of good ideas that could be implemented at your surf park. Next, they had a panel discussing balancing the wave programming, meaning the types of waves and how they're programmed with the surf experience. And they got into the different types of waves that are needed to have a successful surf park, the scheduling of them, customer experience levels, and how variety of waves can impact your revenues. Then we had a presentation on how the U.S. is training for the Olympics, and he got into all the different benefits of a wave pool, which I'm sure if you're a surfer, you already can kind of figure out the benefits of them, but we will get into that in a different episode. Then there was a panel discussion on media in surf parks, and really it seemed to more or less focus on how to run a successful event rather than the media, as well as marketing your surf park. After that, there was another panel discussion on designing your surf park, and once again they said get started early. Start talking to a designer early on in the early stages of your surf park. Make sure to do some significant due diligence, especially in looking at your target market and finding out who are your users going to be, because that's going to play a really big impact on the design of your surf park. And then they discussed some of the stages of surf park development permitting issues, capital management, how to manage your money. They also talked about some important design decisions that you need to make that'll really impact your surf park. Then we had a presentation by Surf Lakes, and they got into some sustainability issues. They discussed pricing of your surf park. They also discussed saturation of the market, and that was an interesting way to look at things in terms of your surf park and considering your long-term business strategy. After that, there was a panel discussion on sustainability. They discussed some different certifications that you can get, which say your surf park is environmentally friendly. And it was an interesting discussion because there were a lot of different takes on sustainability. Different watchdog groups, they have different opinions of what being sustainable is or environmentally friendly. And so you need to take all those into account. Some other issues for sustainability, once again, site selection, overcrowding local spots. Not necessarily in the wave pool, but would surf parks overcrowd your local breaks? And then they discussed some different motivations for having your surf park being a sustainable surf park and some of the best practices for sustainability. They also talked about how surf parks can be leaders and showcase sustainability, and that was a pretty interesting viewpoint. And once again, plan sustainability in their early stages. And then wrapping up the Surf Park Summit, they had several different emerging tech discuss what they're doing and how they can impact surf parks. And they had Airwave, Unit Surf, the Swell and Surf ERA, they all made some presentations about their technology. So that was it for the presentations of the Surf Park Summit. So here's just a little quick review from my perspective of how the Surf Park Summit went. In general, is a good overview of what it takes to develop and operate a surf park. It definitely was not a how-to develop a surf park. It just gave you a whole lot of things that you need to think about and consider if you're wanting to develop a surf park. It's good for somebody to go to it and just get a kind of general big picture view of what it takes, and it would be especially good for somebody who knows how to develop a property in the first place, and just bringing in the surf park element, how a surf park would be different if you're going to be developing land. But for somebody who wants a kind of a how to develop a surf park, it didn't really give a whole lot of details into that. Some of the summit did seem an awful lot like a pitch, but that's totally okay. I didn't have any problem with that, because I mean, these guys are experts in their field, and we did learn a lot from some and a little from others. But this was the second Surf Park Summit that I've been to, and the first one was in person in Orlando, and so there's a big difference between the two. Through the Zoom calls, it kind of lacked some energy. The host, Chris Cote, he did a great job of trying to keep it energetic throughout the Zoom calls. First time I went through it, I watched it live, and by the end of the day, struggling to get through it, being like watching a computer all day long for the most part. The second time I went through it, though, to recap for this, I took several days watching videos over the course of several days. Attending the Surf Park Summit, when it was live, it felt very lonely. I felt like I was the only one watching the summit. It was really weird. There wasn't any kind of chat going on. They didn't have a chat feature to where you could interact with other people watching or ask questions to panelists. And I'm not really sure that asking questions would have worked anyway. It might have prolonged the presentations or cut them short to ask questions, and maybe wouldn't have gotten all the information that you wanted out of it. But it just felt like you were the only one watching it, because there's like no chat, and then there's no networking. The marketing billed it as a way to network, and that I guess there was a very minimal way of networking. They had a vendor page where you could go and talk to different vendors, and I went to probably almost every vendor and made a comment to just about every vendor, and only got a response from a vendor from maybe 2, maybe 3 vendors, and nobody else, as far as I could see, nobody else was making any comments. It seemed like I was the only one there, because there wasn't anybody else asking vendors questions, and again, I didn't get much response from them when I asked a question. Moving on, some of the Surf Park Summit definitely seemed like it was live, like it was going on while we were there, or while I was watching. And it might have been pre-recorded, but some of it definitely seemed live, and others definitely looked like it was pre-recorded. Sometimes people were wearing the same shirts one day to the next, and stuff like that. You could just tell that some of the things were absolutely pre-recorded. And the summit, at least the money portion of the summit, was a bit of a buzzkill. Why it was a buzzkill is they essentially said you have to have millions of money invested into your surf park before you can actually get any institutional money, any bigger money than that. And so that's a little bit of a buzzkill. It definitely sucked the wind out of my sails, because I don't have millions invested. I don't have millions to invest. So I've got to figure out a way of getting millions to invest into my surf park prior to actually getting even more. So anyway, moving on, one thing that I really liked about the Summit, which is kind of silly, but they had some good music. And there was one song in particular that they played over and over and over again, but I didn't mind because it was pretty cool. It was, obviously laid back kind of beach music, but unfortunately they gave no credit to the song. So I don't know who it was. I tried Googling the lyrics, couldn't find it. So I have no idea the song's name or who wrote it, but it was a good song. So anyway, let's wrap this up, and I'll give you some of the big general takeaways from the Surf Park Summit very quickly, just to get this episode finished for you. So the big general takeaways: 1, start early. Go and contact all these guys early. Start working on sustainability or design early, the water quality early. You gotta just try and take all of these elements and get started with it early on in the process. Don't wait, because it's going to all impact you, and it could end up increasing how much money you have to spend if you do things later rather than sooner. And then sustainability is real important. That was a big takeaway, as well as the equity in surfing. Bringing surfing to people who don't even have a beach, but most definitely looking at the female demographic and making sure not to make it a boys club, and making sure that your surf park is female friendly. And then safety, that was a huge takeaway from the summit, as well as site selection. Site selection, once again, one of those early stage things, is so important. So that's my review for Surf Park Summit 2020. I hope you found it helpful. If you like this information and you did find it helpful, please like it, share it, comment, and follow my channel. Or if you'd like to join a Surf Park Summit mastermind group, click the link in the description below. And thanks again for dropping in. I'm kicking out. See ya.